The nest boxes haven't been up for 5 minutes, and already a small cloud of tree swallows is swirling around them. A dusky, gray-backed female lands at the entrance of the box closest to us, her liquid chatter blending with the staccato calls of the western kingbirds on the electrical lines overhead. Beyond her, 2 more tree swallows are investigating another box. Tree swallows are cavity nesters, typically using abandoned woodpecker holes in old cottonwoods and other large trees to raise their young. They also readily use nest boxes as a reasonable substitute. But we certainly didn't expect them to show up so soon. This instantaneous response from the local swallows is immensely gratifying. But it also suggests to us that the birds in this area have been limited by a lack of nest sites. Apparently there is a cavity limitation here, says Megan Filling. Hi there, and welcome to the Wild with Nature podcast. I'm Shane Sater. This story, from May of 2023, is called A Hopeful Sign for a Bird in Decline, Helping Montana's Tree Swallows. If you'd like to follow along with a written copy, along with lots of photos while you listen, you can find that on my website, wildwithnature.com, or you can find the link in the show notes. And now, let's continue with the story. Megan works as a research director and avian ecologist for the University of Montana's Bird Ecology Lab, also known as UMBL. It's the second week in May of 2023, and this morning I'm with her and 5 other wildlife researchers pounding in metal T-posts and putting up cedar nest boxes. The project is a collaboration between UMBL and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, with funding from Northwestern Energy. It's an effort to create tree swallow habitat where these birds are in decline, and to learn what they can teach us about the places where they live. We've just finished installing 10 new nest boxes along the heavily fished tailwaters below Montana's Holter Dam, where the Missouri River cuts a canyon through the red rocks of the Big Belt Mountains, between Helena and Great Falls. There's something very inspiring about watching these sleek, athletic birds checking out their new homes here. And to see them so soon is a huge surprise. Often it takes a year or 2 before tree swallows will set up shop, says Brian Balmer. Brian, a biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, will be leading much of the monitoring to see how the tree swallows respond to these new nesting sites. There had been no such instant gratification at our first site of the morning. There, 16 miles farther upstream, our work was a matter of faith. No tree swallows appeared as we hammered T-posts into the shallow, rocky soil above the river, where larkspurs bloomed and Douglas firs clung to the slopes. They still hadn't arrived, as we attached nest boxes to our last T-posts in that string of 10, on a ridge of loose cobbles overlooking the river. But as we gazed out over the gray-green waters of the Missouri River and the bitter herb smell of big sagebrush wafted through the gray, misty mid-May morning, it seemed like the sort of place where tree swallows could make themselves at home. I have a good feeling about these boxes, said Tricia Rodriguez, UMBL's project manager. Tree swallows are familiar breeding birds across much of North America, equally at home in the baking heat of a central California summer or a somewhat cooler July in Maine. Darting through the air, flashing their glossy blue backs, they twist and turn as they hunt aerial insects on the wing. But although they're widespread and common, their overall numbers have been declining. Analyses of breeding bird survey data since the mid-1960s point to particularly notable declines in the northern and eastern parts of their breeding range. Along the Missouri River in Montana, finer-scale surveys of breeding birds have also shown concerning declines in tree swallows. Systematic songbird surveys from 2004 to 2021, also funded by Northwestern Energy and led by UMBL researcher Anna Nosen, point to a loss of around 25% of the river's breeding tree swallows. An alarming downward trend. Why? Although the exact causes remain uncertain, habitat changes along the river have likely played a big role. The cottonwoods along its banks, which provide nesting cavities for tree swallows, as well as critical habitat for many other birds, are also declining. 2/3 of the cottonwood stands in this area of the Missouri River are at least 50 years old. The trees are aging, and relatively few young ones have been able to establish. Dams have limited the flooding that provides a seedbed for baby cottonwoods, while houses and farms have encroached into the once unpredictable river's floodplain. It's a host of related changes that seem to be impacting many of the river's birds, which depend on these important trees for food, think insects, shelter, and nesting sites. Nest boxes can't replace the missing trees. Unlike cottonwoods, T-posts and cedar boards don't host the caterpillars that yellow warblers and many other birds eat, for example. But by supplementing the nesting cavities that are typically found in old cottonwood trees, nest boxes can help reduce the loss of the tree swallows. That's why it's especially exciting to see the swallows investigating the Holter Dam boxes so soon, just minutes after we've put them up. I'm so obsessed with the birds just getting right into those boxes, says Bridger Creel, a PhD student who works with Humble. Their work focuses on songbirds and heavy metal contaminants one mountain range to the west, along the Clark Fork River. Tree swallow research projects, like this one along the Missouri, aren't just helping provide new habitat for a declining insect eater. Here and elsewhere, they can also teach us important lessons about the surrounding environment. Nesting tree swallows forage close to home, rarely traveling more than 1/3 of a mile from their nests. Their local diet, made up of aerial insects such as midges, mayflies, and dragonflies, means that tree swallows can serve as sentinels for landscape health. If the swallows are thriving and fledging large, healthy clutches, it's probably a sign that the food web they rely on is thriving, too. Meanwhile, by taking small blood samples from the swallows when they're banding them, researchers can monitor for hidden environmental toxins, avoiding nasty, unforeseen surprises that could jeopardize wildlife and people. For the health of our rivers, tree swallows are like the canaries in the coal mine. But unlike the time-worn cliché of the canary in its cage, tree swallows live wild and free, twisting and gliding through the air in a high-speed insect hunt that no human can match. Our last stop of the day is along a west-facing hillside of skunkbush sumac, cheatgrass, and lupin that overlooks the reservoir above Holter Dam. Spotted towhees mew as we install 10 more nest boxes. We stop to pick up the discarded beer cans and water bottles that litter the slope, and look up to see a sharp-shinned hawk circling overhead. Below us, a common loon dives in the reservoir beyond a sparse scattering of aging cottonwoods, the trees crowded between a campground and the water. The plight of the cottonwoods remains, a waning habitat that supports an astonishing, vulnerable bird diversity across the arid West. But today, I'm feeling hopeful. This morning, we put up 30 nest boxes along the river, providing homes for cavity nesters where none existed last year. And over the years ahead, this team of biologists will be looking out for these birds, learning what these sentinels of the river have to teach us. As we get into the truck and drive away, a tree swallow is banking over the hillside, circling where a new nest box overlooks the dammed river. I hope it will stay for the summer and thrive. Fast forward a year now to spring of 2024. Tree swallows have once again returned to Montana, and another nesting season is about to begin. In May and June last year, the tree swallow team installed 100 nest boxes along the Missouri River, grouped into sites consisting of 10 nest boxes each. And even though they were installing the boxes relatively late, when the nesting season had already started, cavity nesting birds still used 29 of them. At several sites, the response of the birds was particularly impressive. And it wasn't just tree swallows. In the first area that I visited with the researchers, where we hammered T-posts into a rocky sagebrush slope, tree swallows used 2 nest boxes, and violet-green swallows used 2 more. At Holter Dam, where we watched the birds find the boxes within minutes, it was pure tree swallows. Even in that first year, they occupied 6 of the 10 boxes. In one box, where a nest with 6 young fledged successfully, the tree swallows re-nested in the same box, laying 5 more eggs. Meanwhile, on the dry hillside above the reservoir, where the spotted towhees had mewed, the nest box community was a mix of tree swallows and house wrens. Between the 2 species, they built nests in a whopping 9 out of 10 boxes. In the 2023 mid-season report that the tree swallow team shared with me, they wrote, "The relatively immediate, high occupancy rates at some sites along the upper Missouri River surprised even our most seasoned avian ecologists. We expect to see increased occupancy in 2024. I return on May 20th, 2024, a sunny morning with a light frost coating the grasses, to check on the nest boxes below Holter Dam. I stand underneath the power line and watch a tree swallow pair that seem to be claiming box 32. Both are perching on top of it, vocalizing frequently over the background hum of the dam. In just a few minutes, I watch them copulate 5 times. And when another female circles nearby, clearly interested in their box, they intensify their chirps. The female defending the box flies to the entrance hole, shielding it from the would-be usurper. Every nest box in sight has 2 or more tree swallows perching on or near it. At box 31, a cloud of 5 swallows are swarming and calling, in the midst of an unsettled debate over who will get to nest here. Meanwhile, at box 35, another pair is perching amiably together. If you close your eyes and listen, there's a music here. A chorus of liquid chirps, a bustle of activity that wasn't here until last spring. The pair on box 32 continues calling. To my ears, it sounds a lot like they're saying, "Thank you." Thanks for listening. One more note about the cottonwoods. Farther downstream along the Missouri River, between Fort Benton and Judith Landing, a project led by Friends of the Missouri Breaks Monument has been attempting to mitigate cottonwood declines directly by planting young plains cottonwoods. Check the written transcript of this story for a link to a 2019 report about that project. This story, like everything I produce for Wild with Nature, is possible only because of the support of a wonderful community of listeners like you. This support ranges from those of you who just share this podcast with your friends, family, and acquaintances, to those of you who sustain my work with a monthly contribution through Patreon. Thanks so much to Jeff, John, David, Caroline, Jeremiah, Luke, Sandy, Linda, Shauna, Kate, Joe, Jane, Jill, Nancy, Jenny, Shalene, Jesse, John, Marisa, Catherine, Corey, Sarah, Howard, Oscar, Louise, Kathy, Will, Cammie, Dorinda, and Elena for making this possible. If you'd like to find a more detailed acknowledgement of these supporters and find out more about how you can support this project, go to my website, wildwithnature.com, and click on the Donate tab. Thank you. Until next time, get outside. And while you're out there, see if you have tree swallows or other swallow species in the area where you live. I invite you to get to know the swallows. And perhaps as you do, you too will find a way to help them thrive.